Yes, Hannah. We need her in the picture. Hannah.
Steve showed his camera, looks like a Yugoslavian.
I think Elam does.
Steve, we need you to take one and we need you to be in there.
Okay, all right.
Just give someone your...
Jack, get over here.
Go on. Be the other half of blue collar radio.
Mark. Hold on, we got one more coming.
Okay, how many of us came from Clifton? Okay.
Just one.
It's got a monkey on it. I didn't drop your phone there. That's okay, it's already cracked. That was fun.
Gorilla glass is expensive.
Get everybody in here. Okay, everybody say cheese.
Cheese.
One more.
Say patriarchy.
Patriarchy.
Let's go. What's the word for both?
Theory.
Theory. One more.
To patriarchy.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
You guys are staying.
Stay in place, please.
Very nice to meet both of you. Thank you for coming. Wow, yes, they're really sharp. Ouch! That's an attack.
That's a swan song. That's a swan song.
Thanks so much for coming.
No hard feelings.
Interesting experience.
Hey, Mom, can we put you behind Paul with a knife?
Oh no, you still want one. No singing.
Close, Steve.
Get in, Steve. Come on.
Gary, you want in?
Join us.
Yeah,
Join us, Steve. Join us.
Where do you want me to go? Find a spot.
Take the red pill. Take it. Break it. It's the color of sage.
Tell us about your privilege.
It's good.
Yeah, do a landscape one. Do a landscape one. Hold it like this. Yes, thank you.
Everybody say privilege. Privilege.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm nominating you as header. Wait, Mom wants a picture. Wait.
And there are no other nominees. There was one that he had to kill it.
We done? Good?
Okay, folks, it's time for the panel. Get the hell off the stage, everybody else. Come on. What are you doing? All right. Yeah, you're good, Stacey. A lot of fun. Jonathan, where's
What about your intern?
Where do you go?
my intern? What?
Yeah, but you know, that's really unfair.
Is Janice gone? Is she retired?
Yes, she was.
Oh. Oh, that's a bummer.
Janice said she wasn't feeling good, so she got back home.
In that case, I will be taking the place of Janice.
There you go.
All right. Okay, okay.
Covers more of his head, that's for sure.
Okay, I'm trying to think about how we're going to do this, microphone particularly. I'm guessing those of you who want to do the panel, since we're out of the battery and the other one, you can try using the really crappy mic, or you can come up here and just speak loudly and clearly for everybody else to hear. As long as you're close enough, you can get this mic too. Just whatever, just come on. 1 hour starting now.
Yes, I'm up here. Ask me questions.
So I was asked to come back up and re-ask this question, and so I'm going to ask it and add a little bit to it.
Okay, just say who you're asking it to. Is it all of us? Is it to Paul? Is it
anyone who's on the panel can answer if they have perspective, because I appreciate perspective. So yeah, I was raised and socialized as a man with a lot of the problems that men face when they're raised as boys, you know, don't show emotion, things like that. But I've always identified as a woman. And so, you know, again, I kind of ask, what is the space and what work can we collaborate and do for the LGBT community within this space?
I kind of already addressed this. Who else would like to take this one on?
Paul's in the last. He gets first rate.
I'll take a shot at it. Hi. Here's the deal. Excuse me, and I'm only speaking on behalf of a Voice for Men here, which is a men's organization, is an organization that advocates for men. My position has always been that the difficulty that gay men have experienced in this society primarily stems from the problem that they're not viewed as men. That they don't fit the mold of what a man's supposed to be, that they don't serve as in utilitarian nature for women. They're not going to be somebody that's going out working a job and taking care of a woman and taking care of what and normally you would expect a nuclear family. And so they don't fit the mold. And I think that that has been the source of a huge amount of discrimination against them, which is why that a Voice for Men has reached out to everybody we can in the gay male community to say that you belong here, that there is a place for you here. However, we recognize you first as a man and not by your sexuality. Which is, and that we've had a really good response to that. We've had a lot of incredibly gifted gay writers from that community come on board and talk about subjects without feeling like they had to be identified as gay first and a man second. So how does AVFM fit in with the scheme with the GLBT community? Well, with the lesbian community, we don't, because we're a men's advocacy group. But I think we offer an alternative for gay men to feeling like that they need to align with feminist ideology, which we believe is ultimately deprecating to men in order to feel accepted. And we've had a very strong positive response to that. The gay men in our community are very, very valued and very, very important, just like any other man.
Of trans people, just because, as you said, you know, when you're born a boy physically, and you go through all of that socialization process, that's difficult enough for a boy who identifies as a boy. And when you're a boy who identifies as a girl, and later a man who identifies as a woman, or you're perceived as a man but you identify as a woman, that's got to just add a huge burden onto something that's already, all of that socialization, all of that masculine socialization, man up, suck it up, don't share your feelings, you know, don't be vulnerable, don't do those, don't do this, don't do this, stay within this narrow, rigid box. That's got to be even more painful when you don't even feel like you're a man. But there are some things, I think there are some things, some virtues of it, exploring masculinity outside of the feminist lens, outside of a sort of blamey kind of atmosphere, and whether feminists want to address that or not. And they may say, we're not intending to make you feel blamed as men, but men feel blamed nonetheless. So I think taking it out of that kind of sick framework, taking the examination of masculinity, your feelings, the problems, and all of the fallout that you'll have from that, especially from an upbringing that doesn't fit your gender, with other men who are not going to basically treat you like dirt because you were born with a penis. You know, I think that there's a lot of value to be had in that. And I think also there's a lot of value to be found in trans men coming in and giving their perspective, because they grew up being socialized as girls and really, really not wanting to have anything to do with that either. So I think probably with trans people that there's a unique opportunity to have someone who has had two perspectives, two experiences, not ultimately two normal experiences, or sort of typical experiences of being a girl and being a boy or whatever. But it's a way, I think, that a way for us to learn. I think we have a lot to learn from trans people, a huge amount to learn from them. And I think that trans people can benefit from exploring that in a culture, in a sort of a group that, you know, doesn't hate them for being born with a penis, or, you know, and doesn't hate them for transitioning into a man and appropriating all of that sweet, sweet privilege, right? You know, I think there's a huge benefit to opening and keeping the doors open for LGBT people. I even think lesbians have something to offer, frankly. So, but, you know, just to add the voices and add the perspectives, I think that this is a really healthy thing, and I would like to see a lot more of it. I know we've had a couple of transgendered writers on A Voice for Men, and I think that we should try and get more of that in the future. So.
I agree, and let me qualify with my joking with Karen. A Voice for Men is one of the most diverse communities you can possibly imagine. Anybody that shares an interest in issues that affect men and boys is welcome in our community and will be welcome, and anybody that doesn't like it is welcome to leave.
I thought it was just a mouthpiece for like 3 of your articles where you were basically saying that all women deserve to be raped or something.
Well, thanks a lot, Sage.
Right. No. It's funny. Yeah, there's always been examples of Paul being quoted out of context, and it's amazing to me that people really ignore the sheer depth and the sheer amount of variety in the writings on A Voice for Men. And I really do see a huge benefit, as Karen has articulated already, to including as many voices as possible from the transgender community. And regarding all of that, I mean, there's just the commentary alone is valuable because you get a beacon of that experience. But I am curious as to how we can learn from that and translate it into something actionable, because I'm not too sure when it comes to the difficulties they face in their transition period. It sounds like something that's like a very domestic kind of experience, something that's in the domestic sphere. I'm wondering, how would that kind of, just add to the discussion, how would that kind of be implemented?
Well, one of the things that was brought to my attention by a fellow in Toronto who works with the LGBT community and is a member of CAFE, is that when you have a trans man whose choice is to pass, right? He's choosing to live as, and he does not want to disclose. He still has female parts, and those parts still need regular checkups, and he really does not benefit from having to go to the Women's Health Center on campus to get those checkups. That's going to out him. There are no services tailored. There's no way you can get pap smear at the men's health clinic. We need to actually start thinking about things like that. to accommodate their needs, because they do have very, very specific sets of needs. Some of them quirky and not every day, but you know, that we need to really think about stuff like that.
Okay. Any other questions anyone would like to approach?
I've just got a quick question. I know, Karen, you've spoken about this. How do you resist entryism? What strategies do you use to prevent entryists from coming in and diverting?
What is an entryist?
It's somebody that comes in as wearing the outfit of a supporter.
Oh, yeah.
They're there to divert, distract.
That's an excellent question. That was actually a very, that's a question that I always have to keep in mind when anybody comes forth as a supporter, because it's a due diligence thing, right? And it's actually been a conversation that I've been having with the National Coalition for Men in particular and their staff in conference calls. I was thinking, we use the term co-option, right? And it's, how exactly do you prevent an organization that's very new from being co-opted by interests that are, you know, kind of, it's that Venus flytrap situation. It's very enticing until you realize it closed up on you and you can't do anything about it. And really, the only answer I can give to that is you have to have a very solid grip on context, a very strong risk, a capacity for risk analysis, and you have checks and balances in your Constitution that, when you detect something is going wrong, you have a capacity to exercise a check or balance to counteract that and gridlock your organization until you resolve the difference. And I'd like to bring up Montesquieuian philosophy here, because that's something that was largely behind the separation of government powers during like what influenced the writings of the United States Constitution and Western constitutions. The idea is that if you were to consolidate power, and that power is under a single philosophy, every other perspective that doesn't have that power, they're screwed. Okay? So you need to be, one thing that you could do is continue to separate powers, and then you introduce checks and balances such that if anybody tries to do something that is dishonest, that is an abuse of power, somebody else can come and slap it down, and then that mutual slap fight happens, causing a gridlock, and no progress is made until some sort of integrity is found. The idea being that no one can dominate and no one can co-opt if there's always somebody that's able to stop you. Problem with checks and balances, though, is they're very abstract and they need to be updated all the time, and that's kind of what Thomas Jefferson was getting at with his quotes. You gotta have you have to be willing to update with the times with the same, while dealing with a bureaucratic nightmare. It's very hard. Preventing entryism, as you've described, is a product of very careful context-based thinking and a unwillingness to just buy something somebody gives you because they just say something you like to hear. Does that answer your question?
I want to take another shot at that, because one of the things where I will probably dissent from Davis's perspective, although I may not be, I have always had to struggle with that for the many years that AVFM has been up now.
You've been doing a great job, that's why I asked.
Thank you. Well, and I think that the key to this, though, and I hate to use the L word, but leadership. Somebody has to be where the buck stops about this stuff, or it will be co-opted. Guaranteed. There's been so many attempts to co-opt AVFM's mission since we started, and to divert away and to push material that was not in the interest okay, I'll say, in my opinion, of men and boys. And this is, my intellectual property in one way, and in another way, it's much bigger than me. But I think that the key there has been that I try to be as tolerant as possible of differing views. And we run a lot of stuff at AVFM that I don't even agree with, as long as it isn't trampling on the mission statement that we have prescribed for what we're about. But the moment that it starts doing that, I will become a dictator. And I've done it many times where I could reach in and I pluck and I go, no. That's all there is to it. And that's how it works for us. It may work differently in many different organizations, but for us, for our work, what we're doing, it depends on somebody always watching that mission statement and valuing it more than their ego, valuing it more than whether or not they have the same views as somebody, and valuing it more than their popularity. And I'm not saying that to brag, but I committed to doing that the moment I realized that AVFM was growing to the level that it was. Because I knew if I didn't, it would follow the route of every other initiative like it and fall apart.
And I'll add one more thing. I'm just curious, before I go into a really long spiel, does anyone else want to contribute to this? No? Okay. Well, regarding KSU Men is an organization that, unlike AVFM, cannot keep the same administration. It just can't. All the students that are in the administration eventually have to graduate. They have term limits in the Constitution. And as a result, that checks and balances I was referring to, you're left with that very difficult design decision. How on earth do you essentially establish the same kind of integrity as an automatic machine that manages the people? That's hard. People are very, very good at subverting boundaries. They're good at it. We're adaptable for a reason. And one of the things about setting up an autonomous machine of that nature is that the minute that somebody figures out a way to subvert it and they actually gain a bit of leverage, the people who detect that, and even if they try to execute a check and balance, some power can self-actualize and people can kind of gain control of that process, and then all of a sudden you've lost it. And I don't think there's a perfect solution, but one thing that does help is accountability. And one of the things that you guys have been doing at the Sarkeesian Effect is just that. You've picked up on some manipulation from the Sarkeesian, from Anita Sarkeesian and the social justice warrior crowd.
You have no idea.
Oh my God. You guys picked up on some dark stuff. And these people, they're powerful, no doubt, but they really, really hate the spotlight. And the fact that you guys are the spotlight is absolutely amazing. Just round of applause for you. So accountability is kind of your last resort in that respect. Any other questions? I understand one of you, blue shirt, hello? Oh, there you go. Hey, you had something. I think that one's completely dead.
Okay, I'll just speak up. Well, I asked the professor a little bit about this during the break, but in my profession and some lobbying that I do, I know maybe a dozen state legislators, school board members, things like that. I'm going to meet with one of them on Monday. I can't just raise my fist and say, feminism should be eliminated. They don't want to hear that. But I can maybe say, okay, I want to do something to make things better for men in this state or boys in this, in the school district. And we talked a little bit about that. Is there one thing, because they don't want a big laundry list of changes that I want made. What would be something that could be done first, as a first step to say, this is a concrete thing that I think we could do to make positive change?
Anyone else? You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you're talking about lower education. The easiest way to gain into the easiest areas to target would be high school and middle school. Just go ahead and forget early childhood education as starting in that area. But if you're going to try and make inroads into lower education, try and find some friends who are really into things like mentoring programs. Try and locate schools where the boys aren't doing so well, schools where there's perhaps a little bit more economically disadvantaged, where there's a lot of people coming from broken homes. Those are really good schools to hit. If you can get in with a mentoring program, like I mentioned earlier to you, there's a Dads of Great Students program. There's a few of them in Atlanta. The good thing about these mentoring programs, father involvement programs, community male mom involvement programs, the good thing about them and why administrators like them is because really a lot of the political onus is on the organization that's coming in. It's not like the administrator himself is really spearheading a lot of it. It's you coming from the outside appealing and trying to find buy-in. So networking with those groups is, and I can provide you resources. You've already given me contact information. That's an excellent way to do that. People love father involvement programs. It's pretty hard for someone to see like a dad coming in and reading to kids, you know, in like a middle school class or an elementary school classroom, either there's, and to say, you know, that kid shouldn't have that. It's pretty hard for them to speak out against that. But that's one area, that's just where I would start. I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Anyone else? Over here?
One thing.
Oh, you want them? Okay.
Bring back recess.
Oh, yeah.
I'm totally serious. Seriously. It's one of the things we tackled. There was a study talking about how recess really helps boys to get out a lot of the rough and tumble play. It really helps them to focus more on their schoolwork once they get all that energy out. So.
I'd like to add something. Actually, bring back recess, bring it back the old-fashioned way. They did a study recently in New Zealand. They actually managed to find 4 schools, elementary schools, that were willing to take on the hideous legal liability of participating. And the study basically was, what they did was they eliminated rules. And in some cases, the schools took it upon themselves to also eliminate supervision. And they just let the kids go out and do what they wanted to do. Some of them had big piles of junk wood and old tires that the kids would build forts with. Just like, you know, just like in the movie The Sandlot. You know, like kids did in the 60s, before we all got crazy insane about, you know, I don't know, tetanus and pedophiles. Okay, so I mean, like you have these kids. They went out, they would play. If they wanted to skateboard without a helmet, they'd skateboard without a helmet. If they wanted to climb a tree, they would climb a tree. There's nobody telling them what to do or how to behave. If they got into a shoving match, there was no adult who was going to come and intervene. And what they found in these 4 schools was that not only did the number of injuries of students during recess decrease, but bullying virtually disappeared. These kids had to figure out a way to get along on their own without an adult to back them up. You lost the whole relational aggression aspect of one child being the instigator and getting the other child in trouble, right? Because I was just quietly poking this guy and nobody noticed, and then he finally hit me and now he's suspended, right? All of that went away. The kids actually really benefited from not just recess, but old school recess, right? And they didn't just benefit psychologically and socially and interpersonally, but there were fewer trips to go get stitches. I mean, it's a win all around. And that's the kind of recess we need to bring back. And that's the kind of study that if I were going to a legislator and trying to make life better for boys in school, that's the kind of study that I would present to a legislator, right?
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback on what Karen was saying. Also, we come from we live in very litigious, I'm not sure what I'm saying, that we're litigious times, where people are very quick to sue over anything. You know, we increasingly have deferred to our education system the responsibility of raising our kids. And, you know, we send our kids off to school, and, you know, if a kid gets a skinned knees or a scrape, you know, there really is, I think, sometimes just a tendency to just kind of go after them. I think we have to realize, you know, that sometimes skinned knees are a good thing for kids. You know, it's not like, you know, kids are going to be kids. They're going to run around. They're going to play. They're going to get a bruise. And it's not always, you know, something that's legally actionable. But it's all just part of being a kid and exploring the world around you. Of course, there are boundaries. You know, if some little kid, you know, drowned in a pool or something like that, yeah, of course, we're going to wonder, you know. And that's, you know, I think they should have had supervision, you know, if they wander off school property or something like that. But there needs to be a little bit of a relaxation because administrators are not going to back off whenever they always feel on edge. So there's a certain responsibility that falls to the community for that as well.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Any other question? Oh, okay. You fight to the death.
We should be passing this up anyway.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right, I have a question for John. Actually, it's kind of a two-parter. I was wondering if while you were training to be a teacher, if you experienced any difficulty or discrimination that would be unique to men going through that training. And then do you also, second part, do you think that might have any effect on the rates of male teachers that we're seeing now, the low rates of male teachers?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I actually went through 2 rounds of teacher training. First as a college instructor. Once I saw how much liability and how much student loan debt I was going to get into going down that road to become a professor, I tried to cut my losses and become a high school teacher. Then went through Region 10 teacher certification program. When I was going through it as a college instructor, being in that environment, I watched as numerous of people who I considered my friends were converted into feminist ideology, essentially. Because in my school, what we had to take, the required courses we had to take, which were essentially pitched, the course description was pitched these classes as classes that would enhance our teaching experience, because we were master's students, we were graduate assistants, we were also teaching at the time. These classes were a little more than feminist indoctrination. And really, it created an acrimonious environment, I think, and it was very clear which side the establishment in my school was on. That was on the side of feminism. You require these people write your letters of recommendation. The person who was teaching that course, one of the 2 courses that I had to take, which was called the colloquium course, was also the program director for first-year composition. She was a feminist. She became my boss. All right. So if I was going to get a job as in first-year composition at another institution, I would have to have her write me a letter of recommendation, and in order to do that, I would have to toe the correct political line. That's just the reality of it. And also going through teacher training at Region 10 for teaching 8th through 12th grade. Really that's something that wasn't overtly presented to me at the time. I'm proud to say that I think Texas is better in a lot of regards. I'm happy to say that. But I do remember asking a woman named Kaynell Gandy, who was a veteran teacher, who had a lot of sage advice. I asked her, what happens, what do you do if you're accused, and if you're accused of some kind of sexual misconduct as a teacher? And is there any way to, because a lot of the time they just, they place you on administrative leave, or, you can't teach while that's happening. Is there any way to kind of clear your name to get that off your record? And she very obviously didn't want to answer that. So it's really, in higher education, I think the anti-male bias is more overt, although some people would disagree with me on that. But a lot of it is also the lack of procedural safeguards as well. So does that answer your question? Maybe I'm being too long.
Okay, actually before you get started there, I wanted to ask, if I could, this is kind of really off the cuff here, my videographers, would you guys be okay with running just 10 minutes over 11 o'clock? Since, our Q&A is going a little late. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
I shall. Well, I think that the conversation as it is, you have to be pretty damn brave to come out as a men's rights activist. And I think it's easier here on college campuses because you have, well, you've established a community, a smaller community. It's easier now. What can be done to, in your local town, your local community, what can be done to create a community so people can feel safe to come out as a men's rights activist?
I got this. All right, go. As the newest.
As Janice is standing.
I'm the newest MRE up here, so I think I've done this most recently. Good. When I first joined KSU I was terrified. Sage asked me to do some tabling events with them. I agreed, but then as I thought about it, I was kind of worried of how people would react, and I thought about chickening out, but I went and did it and I saw it. You'll survive it. You know what you believe in, and that's worth taking this risk for. And to make it safer for others, we have to do our job and do our job well. If people come to understand that we're not what people say we are, then it gets easier for others.
Yeah.
There's also, I mean, also there is results, right? When you actually accomplish something, you have something under your belt, you end up kind of developing a, I mean, you have a sense of accomplishment to say, look, what we're doing works, right? And when somebody was to try to use whatever weapons they have at their disposal to make you look like a beating, misogynistic asshole, then that just ends up sliding off of you anyway, because when subjected to public scrutiny, people start to realize where the truth lies. So it really is just a matter of just not only knowing your stuff, but also being able to translate it into action and just showing your stuff as well.
Sure. Let me take a shot at that too, and probably invite some rocks being thrown at me by some of my fellow MRAs. Well, I'm looking around, and I'm one of the few in this room I see is old enough to remember when feminists in the late 60s started asserting themselves. It was not like that it was an easy ride for them. It's one thing if some idiot on the internet now says all feminists are is a bunch of bulldogs. When that was said in the late 60s, 98% of the people didn't know that it wasn't true. The blanket generalizations about feminists were damaging, and it took guts for us, and not that, again, I'm not getting into the validity of many supposed feminist issues, but one of the feminist issues that I do strongly agree with is that our culture was ready to have a society in which both sexes could decide what they wanted from their lives, that they didn't have to be pinned down to anything based on their sex. And it wasn't like it was just a snap for women to go from 1950s America to what we see now, which is women doing literally everything. It seems commonplace now, and it seems all fine, and it is. But when it first started, it took some guts to step out there. When you ask the question, what can we do to make it feel safe? My answer to that is quit giving a fuck about safety. And go with your values.
All right, anyone else? I saw your hand up first, actually. Go ahead.
Really for any of you. I know a lot of times, like men's rights activists, equal rights activists, and anti-feminists are more or less used interchangeably. What do you see as the difference, if any, and why do you feel that it's important?
Oh, why? What is important?
The difference between, say, a men's rights activist movement versus an anti-feminist movement.
Well, I will say here that there's just a lot of different ways that people are defining themselves in this regard. I mean, you have a men's rights movement, you have a pro-feminist branch and an anti-feminist branch. I believe it was the 70s when they started branching off. Am I correct in that? And the anti-feminist branch exploded in popularity in recent years in regards to the coverage regarding the institutional corruption that we've been witnessing. And the pro-feminist branch ends up going to make things like No Masks and the Good Men Project. And when you end up with organizations like that, you kind of, the difference that you kind of really perceive in between an anti-feminist and a men's rights activist is kind of, I think, just from my experience, are you looking at gender issues and men in an ideological way or not, right? And I use the term non-feminist again to refer to the non-ideological way, since the feminism is pretty much the de facto standard ideology by which we evaluate gender. But anti-feminism, as I've articulated over and over and over again in these talks, is that it's pretty much a desire for change now. That's how it seems to be in action today. And I think that it's important to remember that distinction just to remove miscommunications regarding the intentions of people right now. Of course, as I said, as ideologies change, people's motivations change and things like that, but as of this moment, it's important to remember the difference so we understand the goals and the values by which we're following for clearer communication. Anyone else? Want to take that one?
That's right. Anyhow, I also think it's really important to look at people like, say, Sean Hannity or Rush Limbaugh and acknowledge that they may be heavily anti-feminist, but they certainly are not men's rights activists in any way, shape, or form. Right? There is definitely a significant overlap, that there are a large number of MRAs who happen to be anti-feminist and another number of them who happen to be heavily non-feminist. Just basically, they just don't even want anything to do with it. They don't necessarily want to combat it or challenge it, but they just want to just ignore it. And there are websites like Good Men Project and organizations like not the Good Rep White Ribbon, and Walk a Mile in Our Shoes, and other groups that basically those organizations seem to be just like the He for She campaign, which is let's get men jazzed up about equality so that they can help support and protect women, and provide women with the equality that women want. And that's not gender equality, that's not equality between sexes, and it's certainly not respecting men. And so basically I would not qualify those organizations as men's rights activists. They're not advocating for any rights for men, they're advocating for greater responsibilities for men to benefit women. You walk a mile in her shoes to raise money for battered women's shelters, but you're not fighting for your right to have your own battered men's shelters, right? You're not fighting to change the laws to make them more equitable so that when you call, when your wife is attacking you, you call the police, you're not the one who's going to get arrested, right? Those men are not fighting for men's rights to due process. They're not fighting for men's rights to equal treatment under the law. They are fighting for men's responsibility to help support and protect women. And that's just that really they've widened up the path a little bit for men and said, oh, you can be effeminate and cry. You know, you should be allowed to cry. Yeah. And you should be allowed to, you know, express your femininity. But you don't deserve equal rights and protections under the law. And you still have to provide the things that women say they want and need, particularly protection and provisioning and support. Right? So I would not call what has become of the feminist men's rights activists of that era, I would not call what they have become men's rights people at all.
Yep.
So, advocating holding women's feet to the fire and responsible, as men say, I don't know, like correcting mistakes from first-wave feminism, you know, having females register for selective service, would that fall under men's rights or equality? Or?
Yes, it would. Of course. I want to expand a little bit more on what Karen said, too. I think it's probably one of the most incisive questions so far this evening is what you've asked. Right now, Mark Angelucci, Vice President for NCFM, has filed a federal lawsuit to include women in selective service, that should be no more barriers. Yay. We support that completely. I would rather see selective service abolished, but if we're going to have selective service, it should include everybody. I firmly believe that. But let me go back to what Karen was talking about the Rush Limbaugh types and what have you. I did not engage life as a men's activist so that I could climb on a white stallion and return to the days of glory when I had a woman vacuuming the carpet, wearing pearls in a nice dress, and going to fetch my sandwich when I wanted it. That was nothing to do I had no ideas like that whatsoever, never have. One, I don't think that when we see some, like there's some websites out there that, I'm not even going to mention it, but actually believe that we can go back to being kings. Like 0.0001% of the population of men were kings, so we can all go back and be kings. That's absolutely brain dead, in my opinion. We don't, for me, I don't want to become a part of a movement that starts prescribing more mortality for men, and more disposability, and more utility. What I want is as close as we can approximate. The idea of equality is a tough problem anyway, because you can't find two individuals that are equal to each other, much less two classes of human beings. That's a pipe dream. But equality as a goal, as something to shoot toward, unless you get crazy about it, is really a pretty good thing. And so I would like just an equal playing field, with women having every opportunity that men have, and with men having every opportunity that women have, and being treated equitably under the law. People like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, that crowd, who was that fruitcake that Helen Smith?
Oh, Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, that group of people have none of men's interests in mind. They could care less.
Tucker said, you don't become a man until you take responsibility for others. And
yes.
Who cares if you get a raw deal for it?
Yes, essentially what Tucker Carlson says is that if you're a real man, you take a shit deal and you keep your mouth shut about it.
Oh.
Not in this men's movement. The thing is shooting for this, separating. The other problem is that this division between MRA and anti-feminists is a very complicated one. One, I believe fully that feminism is a barrier to men's rights. It really is. It's a big-time barrier to men's rights, and it needs to be solved. But one of the big problems of that is that if our struggle is just anti-feminist, then we're not looking at the struggles we have from people like Rush Limbaugh and from Tucker Carlson, which are ultimately more oppressive.
Oh, well, they oppose feminism because women are getting uppity. And they, not because feminism has dubious ideological assumptions attached and running all through it, but because it makes them women uppity. And it also, it strikes at the heart of traditional masculinity that the man should take on the burdens of everyone. Right? That his wife and his daughters would rather see him as that one man told Brené Brown in her, when she was talking about shame, studying shame, that it's not football coaches and it's not your friends, it's not your buddies, and it's not your father who do it to you. I have a wife and I have 2 daughters, and they would rather see me die on my white horse than fall, right? That is also a huge, huge thing, and that is the heart of the Tucker Carlson's perspective, the Sean Hannity's perspective, right? Not just that the women are getting uppity and forgetting their place, but that the men are getting lazy and cowardly, and they're forgetting their place.
I will not try to talk that.
Okay, we're getting close to about time where we adjourn. Now, I would like to, I want to mention that there's a very attractive white ribbon that a lot of people were wearing. And because I'm a traitor and I'm careless, I ended up losing mine. But I do, yeah, right, oh, thank you. Oh, what's he about to do to me? Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, he's shunning you. He's socially shunning you.
Oh, shit.
You're no longer one of us.
Oh, right. Oh, no, I got it now. Can you come back? Please take me back. All right. Right, all right. So, anyway, I wanted to kind of give Paul the floor for the last few minutes before I deliver a closing address. So, Paul, please tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the new whiteribbon.org and why it is an example of doing something right.
Okay. Can I see a show of hands of people that are familiar with the White Ribbon Campaign? It is basically something that has happened mainly in the UK and Australia and Canada, a program where men are encouraged to wear a white ribbon to show that they won't hit women. Nobody's encouraging women to wear a white ribbon to show that they won't hit men. They have invested millions, literally, in this branding and in getting it around the world. Only one problem, and as most of us know, and I'm trying really hard not to be too smug about this, but it is difficult. With all the money and financing, they weren't smart enough to pick up the domains for White Ribbon and White Ribbon Campaign. .org. And I thought, wow, that's curious. That's really curious. Why would you invest all that time, energy, money, worldwide marketing, and not buy the domain? So I bought it. With a tip of the hat to Malcolm Johnson for this, heavily involved in getting this our way. So what we did was we built a new website, whiteribbon.org, also whiteribboncampaign.org, in which we have placed, there is no men's rights literature on this whatsoever. The only thing there is the science on domestic violence. The only thing there is the actual research, interviews with the experts, Martin Fiber, Murray Strauss, all the people that we've interviewed that are world-renowned experts in violence. There is a pledge for people to sign that is basically a pledge of not committing violence against anybody. That violence itself is wrong. So this is like a separate operation, but we encourage people, now that we're telling you about this, so please Facebook it, tweet it, pass it around, because what this does is it gives an opportunity for people to come in and see the actual science, see the research. Martin Fiber out of Southern Cal has an annotated bibliography that includes research of so many empirical studies and surveys that involves almost 400,000 people. And they all conclude that women are as violent or more violent than men in relationships. And we have interviews that discuss the effects of intimate partner violence on children. And this is one of the big things that gets lost in this whole dispute about domestic violence. We say, feminists have the narrative that almost all violence is committed by men against women. It is a reflection of patriarchy and an extension of men's patriarchal dominance into the home, and that's why they're so invested in the Duluth model, and why you can't have women that are battering, and you can't have lesbian relationships that are battering, because it blows patriarchy theory clean out of the water and totally debunks the Duluth model. But so when we bring our evidence out as MRAs, they say, okay, well, maybe some more women are violent, but women get hurt more, men do more damage, so back to square one, right? It's all about the women.
Or women only hit in self-defense.
Yes, or women only hit in self-defense, which is absolute bullshit.
Even when they report that they
But here's the deal, and I can tell you this is with 20 years of clinical experience as a counselor dealing with people with addiction problems in their families and having dealt with this issue over and over and over again. It was neither parents in almost all cases that were destroyed by the violence in the home, it was their children. And it didn't matter if it was mom hitting dad or dad hitting mom. It was the children that suffered for it. And I'm as tired as anybody at the shop or marketing of in the name of the children. But I'm just telling you my experience is that when I talked to families about violence in the home, the parents would discuss it as though, okay, yeah, then this happened and that happened, and he's a bastard and she's a bitch and whatever. But when the children were asked about it, they could barely talk, and sometimes could not talk, and sometimes completely walled off. Because these are children that are laying up at night, worrying about if their families are going to break apart, worrying about if one of their parents are going to get hurt, and they live with this every day. Those are the victims of domestic violence in this culture, and that is something, unfortunately, that neither feminists nor MRAs have done enough to come out and inform people about. And we are using, yes, we're piggybacking right on the White Ribbon campaign, but we need to let people know that violence is a generational, dysfunctional family issue that primarily affects children, and we need models to address it from that perspective and not from the man bad, woman good paradigm, and not from the MRA reaction of, oh yeah, well what about women? Let's look at the violence that's happening in families, and that's what whiteribbon.org is all about. And if the White Ribbon people that are selling the domestic violence lie are bothered by that, all I can say is imagine my concern.
All right. Now it's time to say goodnight.
I said no singing.
No, shut up.
If you tug on your ear, I'm walking out.
Oh, babies. All right, we are now approaching the end of the conference. I wish we had more than one day to do this, but given the fundraiser, this is pretty much what we were able to do. But I gotta tell you folks, this has been absolutely incredible. We've gone from, again, just a lone wolf operation to now a 17-member organization. As a student organization on one of the 15 largest campuses on the United States, we are now a men's rights on campus, and this conference is proof that it is now a system. So, I can tell everybody is going to be very tired. Everybody's already tired. We need to go ahead and get some rest. And I wanted to thank you all for traveling so far, for putting in so much work, and for showing so much support. Because over the next year, we're going to see what happens with KSUM. And again, in 5 days, KSUM turns 1 year old. And I'm asking KSU students to step forward and consider becoming an officer and becoming a pioneer in human rights advocacy. What example are you going to set? So, thank you all very much, and good night.